From our studios in the Southern Food and Beverage Museum in New Orleans, welcome to our Louisiana Eats podcast series, Quick Bites. I'm Poppy Tooker. If your childhood was spent anywhere from Beaumont, Texas to Mobile, Alabama, it's a good guess your Easter basket was filled with Elmer gold bricks, heavenly hash, and pecan eggs. With a heritage that reaches back to 1855, Elmer Candy is not only the oldest candy maker in Louisiana, but one of the oldest in the nation. Today's president and CEO, Rob Nelson, is the third generation of only the second family to guide Louisiana's Elmer Candy Company. I am so honored and thrilled to be here with you in Ponchatoula at the Elmer's Chocolate Plant. Tell us what sets you apart here in Ponchatoula.
Well, I think in any business you have to be the best at whatever you do if you're going to be around for the long haul. So for the things that we've chosen to concentrate as being our business, we have, I think, the most efficient plant in the world for what we do. Now, people locally know us for Easter candy. They don't even know that we're in boxed chocolates, a lot of people. But Easter candy is a very, very small part of our business. We only run it for about 6 weeks. We're making it the same way it's been made for decades. And really for the reason that here in Louisiana, people expect what they expect, and we can't change it. So we do it the same way.
Your Easter candy business in the Gulf South is truly standalone. Tell us a little bit about that. What happens to the Easter candy from the rest of the country? We just don't let it across the state line?
Well, it's out there, but it's really amazing, and every year it just never ceases to amaze me. So there's a national leader throughout the country, the number one item in the United States, but in this market, from Beaumont, Texas to Mobile, Alabama, about as far north as I-20, there are 3 items that outsell that item in this market, and that's gold brick, heavenly hash, and pecan eggs. So why is that? I think, it's a tradition. There are people that they buy it at this time of year and they store it in their freezer to have it all year long. I have a lot of evidence to that, and I hear a lot of stories. And probably during Easter time, a week doesn't go by that I don't hear a story like that. And I think it's traditions are passed down through generations. I also heard a statistic once of the people that live in Louisiana. There's a much higher percentage that are actually from here, that live here, and that's different than any other state. So it makes it easier for traditions to be handed down.
That's a wonderful thing. Now, knowing the people of South Louisiana as I do, what do you think they're doing with all of that candy, that Easter candy year-round? Are they just stealing a bite out the freezer? Or are people, you must have some stories about unusual things that people do with your Easter candy.
Well, I know that people hoard it. I have a couple of stories to that effect. One, after the Saints won the Super Bowl, we did a Saints version of the gold brick and heavenly hash, and it sold really well. But I could tell that people even hoarded that because it affected next year's Easter sale. So you know that there's something going on there. The other thing, and they say that there's no such thing as bad publicity, but we all went through Katrina, and I didn't go home for quite a while. I live in Metairie, and so front page New York Times, not long after Katrina, the days of everybody pulling their refrigerator out to the street, and then the street was lined with refrigerators. Well, they had a photograph of a freezer, and it was filled with our product. Didn't look so good in September of 2005, but there it was, front page of the New York Times.
Elaborate for me a bit about how you managed to go from this very high-tech production to hands-on, hand-dipping, hand-wrapping, low-tech Easter production.
It's a challenge. It's a whole different skill set. It's a whole different set of equipment, and it's almost like each year we have to remember how to do it. But a lot of effort goes in to make sure that we're doing exactly the way that it needs to be done. On a year-round basis, the business that we're in is so competitive, where seconds count, and ratios of the piece of candy can make a huge difference of whether or not we make money or we don't make money. So it's very exact, and it comes to Easter, and it's just everybody knows how to make Goldbricks and Heavenly Ash pecan eggs, and it's almost like a little less stressful. It's just different work, and sometimes it's harder work in a way, more physical, but it's different, and I think it's a break, really.
That's so interesting that your employees have these high-tech skills, and yet they can go back to hand dipping at the very low-tech side.
Well, we all like to sometimes get our hands in the dough in the kitchen, right? So at home, everybody likes to cook and do something, and certainly it's fun to do something that's appreciated. For people that work here, sometimes they're thought of as being celebrities in their neighborhood because that's what they do, So it's fun. It's an amazing how much attention we get this time of year for something we only do 6 weeks a year.
Amazing is an understatement. With that, I had to see for myself what happens in a state-of-the-art candy factory when time is rolled back over 50 years. Luckily, the Elmer's employees are more serious about their jobs than Lucy and Ethel were on that I Love Lucy episode from the 1950s. As the exposed, shiny marshmallow insides of Heavenly Hash passed on a constantly moving belt, several ladies stood by, each poking 2 whole almonds into every egg. A little further along, and a group stood around a vat of chopped pecans, coating the nougat eggs with nuts as they were hand-tossed about. Much of the wrapping and packing was done completely by hand as well. A far cry from the precision German-tooled machine process that goes on the rest of the year. Let's go back to the beginning. What prompted your grandfather to get into the candy business?
He was single at the time and met a woman from New Orleans, and on his first date said he would marry her. Now, they weren't New Orleans time, so he came down to visit New Orleans for the first time. He flew from Los Angeles to New Orleans, and she was supposed to pick him up at the airport. And it's a funny story because he waited and waited, and she never showed up. So this is right around 1959, 1960, somewhere in there. And she waited and waited, or he waited for her, and he's looking at his watch. He said, well, if she's not here in 10 minutes, I'm going to grab that flight back to Los Angeles. So lo and behold, she showed up right at the last minute, and so he stayed, and they ended up getting married, and he stayed in New Orleans. So I like to joke around people, with people here in the company that that's how close it came to us not being where we are today.
So you grew up in this business. What are your earliest memories? I know you said you went to work with your dad as a child a lot, but tell me about growing up in a chocolate business. What was that like?
So Easter was really the bread and butter of the company, and that was really the cash cow for the company at that point in time. And so, and the selling process was different. I mean, we had people going to the stores in New Orleans, and we had K&B, and we had Schwegmans, and we had all these, some of these other retailers that just bought so much. I mean, you would go to a K&B drugstore, and one side of the aisle was us, and the other side of the aisle was everybody else. So it was major. And today, everything's sold on data. It goes in. We sell it, by Valentine's Day for Easter, and we don't make any more. Back then, we were making it right up to the last minute. Every Good Friday growing up, I was here in this building helping to load trucks. We would load trucks on Good Friday. We would load trucks the day before Easter. So, my friends were going to Florida for Easter or whatever, and I was, in my teenage years, I guess that was happening, and I was driving a truck. So we were delivering right up to the last minute. And I do remember as a kid, waiting for those last orders on the day before Easter, and in between trucks, we would skateboard through the factory. Because, there are these perfectly smooth floors, and, it's a lot easier to skateboard in the Elmer Candy Factory rather than on the streets of New Orleans. So it really worked out well, and a lot of times I was able to bring friends to come do that. It was work, but it was fun.
Absolutely, and I bet the benefits were great. How much candy did you eat?
That's kind of a self-correcting thing. People ask if people are allowed to eat candy here, and the answer is no. But if it does happen, it gets to a point where you eat so much, it self-corrects. You're not going to want it for a while. But certainly there were probably those days as a kid that we ate a lot of candy. But and my 6-year-old would do the same thing if I let him.
And when it comes to those box chocolates that you're making, what's the variety? How many different choices do you have in a box of chocolates?
Well, we did a lot of research on this because one thing is, you've heard the old thing of people sticking their finger in the middle of the chocolate. Oh, I don't like that one. I don't like this one. And looking for the map on the back to figure out which ones they like and which ones they don't like. And people eat maybe a quarter of the box and they throw away 3/4. So we wanted to get away from that. And certainly if you're automating something, the more standardized you make it, the better. And so we did a lot of research. We did focus groups. We did, you think about the old Pepsi challenge days. We literally went to the shopping malls around the country and had taste tests with people. And we came up with 5 different pieces that we saw as the most favorite pieces. We make a strawberry cream that's covered in milk chocolate. We make a orange cream that's covered in dark chocolate, and we make a truffle center, and that's in a heart shape in most of our boxes. And in a round shape, we make a caramel, and then we have another caramel that we make, but we inject dark chocolate into the caramel, so it's a dark chocolate caramel. And so those are the 5 pieces.
I think that it's fascinating that you all are continuing to change with the times. Tell us about your innovation in ingredients that you're currently going through.
What we've done is we've made a move to no artificial flavors or colors, and we were pretty close to that already. I mean, there was a couple of there was like one color and one flavor that's kind of hard to do all natural, but we did a lot of work on that the last 2 years, and so for starting in 2018, all of our box chocolate will be no artificial flavors or colors.
With all of this cutting-edge technology and constant motion at Elmer Chocolate, the Nelson family's classic products have the most staying power. I asked Rob about the origins of the Gold Brick and Heavenly Hash eggs we all adore.
The earliest I know about Heavenly Hash goes back to right around the turn of the century. There was a department store on Canal Street that made Heavenly Hash, and the Elmer family purchased the recipe and the trademark in 1923. And so the Elmer family started making Heavenly Hash at that point in time, in 1923. And then in 1936, they wanted to come up with a new product, and they formulated the Gold Brick at that time. And the interesting story was that when it came out in 1936, candy bars on the shelf were a nickel. And this was the first product that came out for a dime, and it was smaller. And people were saying that, that'll never sell. It's smaller, and you want twice as much money for it. It'll never sell. But it did, and it was a big favorite in New Orleans.
Earlier, I'd had a trip down memory lane while in the waiting room at Elmer's. Original packaging for Chewies and mint bubblets were displayed alongside chocolate boxes from earlier eras. My grandmother, Nana, had quite a sweet tooth, so her sweetheart, my grandpa, made sure there was always a signature big gold box of Elmer chocolates at hand. Today, the packaging has changed, and many of those original products are gone, but Elmer Chocolate has grown to be one of the largest volume boxed candy producers in North America. I asked Rob how this transition came about.
You had a lot of general line candy companies around the country, and they serviced a certain geographical area of the country. So in the Gulf South, it was Elmer Candy, and they made, not only did they make Heavenly Hash and Gold Bricks, but they made hard candy, they made Chewies, they made pralines, they made all sorts of different items. And you would go to the store shelf here in New Orleans, and everything on the shelf was Elmer. It was all different types of products, but most of it, I would say over half of it, was Elmer Candy. It was kind of the jack of all trades, master of none. And that's when we decided to focus on seasonal box chocolate. And so we stopped in 1982, stopped making hard candy. We stopped making Chewies and just concentrated on box chocolate. Now, where the innovation came is at that point in time in the Valentine box chocolate market, you basically had a 1 pound heart. That was the big seller. Everybody had a 1 pound heart. You had a 2 pound heart, you had a ½ pound heart, and a quarter pound heart. So, and you had 1 or 2 people making all these boxes for all the different candy manufacturers in the country. And we figured out a way to make our own box. Let me say this, that quarter pound box, that 4-ounce box of chocolate, retailed for about $1.99. And we figured out a way to make the box, assemble it here, in line, pack it, and be able to sell it at a price where a retailer could buy it, we could make some money, they could make some money, and they could retail it at $1. So, this retail for this item that, there wasn't a lot sold at the time. It was either $1.49, $1.99, and overnight, here it is, it's sold for $1. And it opened up a whole segment of Valentine. It's now, in units, the biggest segment of Valentine. And that really put us on the map. And so as we've grown as a company, you can now go out and buy hearts that are $20, $25, $30, but the bulk of what you find are $1. And that same box that we made in the 1984, 85, it was $1. It's still $1. And think of all the different things that have happened, from raw materials going up to labor rates, or everything that goes into making candy. And that's really the innovation that has made that happen.
That is really impressive. Now, there's a lot of innovation that has been happening here at the Elmer Chocolate Factory. Tell us those wild numbers. How many pieces of candy? How many boxes?
We're making about 3,000 pieces a minute. So we're making 4.5, 5 million pieces of candy a day. We've devised a way to capture that and move it around efficiently. And none of our chocolates for box chocolate are ever touched by human hands. So it's made on state-of-the-art equipment. As it's moved around, it's encased, kind of a configuration we've designed, and then it's packed by robotic arm, picks it up, puts it in the box at very high speeds. So we have multiple lines, but if all of our lines were making that same product, we could make 800 boxes of candy every minute. What we make, I would say 70% of what we make all year long sells in about 3 days.
Once I heard those numbers, I had to get a look at that magical candy-making production line.
Hey, Kel. How are you doing? Hey, Miss Sarah, how are you?
Okay.
So this building, the office building and the building we're walking into here, was built in the late 60s. It had opened up in January of 1970. And it's been added on to multiple times, most recent in 2016. The technology is called cold stamp. All right, so we went from enrobing our chocolates, which was making a center, putting on the belt, and then dosing, just completely covering with chocolate, to making a molded product. So, and to get that center on the inside of the piece, we have to make a shell for the chocolate, then we put the center in, and then we put a bottom on it. But it's a long process. It's about, this whole line as a mold travels through the line, it's 130 yards. So it's longer than a football field. And there's many different stages to it. And it goes vertically and back, so it's really more than 130 yards. So this is technically the beginning. This is a typical mold. This is for a heart-shaped piece, it's a truffle. I can take a whole one out.
Oh, great.
So what happens here is the molds have come back through the system, and we take this apparatus takes a picture of it and make sure that nothing's inside the mold. And if it does, it kicks it out, and a new one goes into the system. But this is a continuous chain that just pushes the molds through the system. then it goes through a heater. Now the mold has to be an exact temperature for us to put chocolate into it. If we want, the chocolate, we're tempering that chocolate, and if the mold is too cold, too hot, it may detemper that chocolate or cause bloom on the chocolate, which we don't want to happen. Which, if you know what a chocolate that's bloom looks like, it's got kind of a grayish tint to it, or it doesn't have a good snap. So we try to make nice, shiny chocolate. So we heat it. Here is where we would be depositing the shell. Okay, so the apparatus isn't in here, but at this point in time, we're depositing chocolate, like a dab of chocolate in the mold. It goes through a vibration system. And then we've got the cold stamp room over here. This is the driest place in the state of Louisiana. It's 1% humidity. When this line was installed, it was the best line in the United States at the time. So what happens here is, so the mold goes in. We have 4 different shapes, and so we can do an easy changeover just by rotating that. But that is cooled to about 1 degree Fahrenheit. Again, we have to keep this 1 to 2% relative humidity in this room because that is so cold in Louisiana that would frost up, right? So we got to make sure that doesn't happen. Water and chocolate, not a good combination. And so as this little mold comes through with a little dab of chocolate, that presses into it and makes a perfect shell. And so as we go out the other side, you would just have these trays of, you would see chocolate on the inside, but a perfect shell. And it goes through a cooling system. Now, if you see this building, the way we built it, we have suspended ceilings here, and up that's a whole other floor. So all of our utilities, we have chocolate lines, oil lines, everything that we need. A lot of the raw materials flow through the ceiling. We've designed this to be a perfect building for food safety.
This looks like, just to the uninitiated eye, which is mine, when you drive over here, you pass a lot of oil refineries, and that's sort of, this looks like it's as technical as an oil refinery.
It's interesting because I think it is technical. We have 3 different lines here, okay, and the first line makes a fondant center. It's fondant, so it's the basis for our cream centers. We make a strawberry and an orange cream. The center line here is a caramel line. So you think about making caramel. This is a true caramel. Let me say this. All of our product now for box chocolates is no artificial flavors or colors. And so, when you get that bite into that caramel and it's that brownish color, that's a natural caramelization from the caramelization process. And we can change that, make adjustments in the program. Everything is continuous. It's all by program. And so we're cooking the caramel, we're cooling it, and then we're going to be depositing the chocolate. So that's our second line. The third is we have 2 ball mills.
2 what mills?
They're called ball mills. So, ball mills. So if you think about some of the popular spreads, chocolate spreads you can buy in the supermarket, this is the way that they're made. And we make a truffle center here. We're starting off with cocoa powder and different fats and mixing things up. We pump it over to the next room to be deposited. Now, one of the things we can do here, if you've ever there are some products on the market that are molded that might have caramel on the inside, and if you bite into it, the caramel drips all over your cheek or over your chin. And our research says that ladies don't like that because it messes up their makeup. So
that's right.
We have a process here where, and it's not very many lines like this in the U.S., but we're able to cool that caramel so fast that we can deposit it into the chocolate and cool, very hot caramel before it melts the chocolate. So our caramel is much more of a creamy type texture rather than the drippy texture.
What is the time element on that? It must be like zap.
This cooler here is hurricane force winds of cold air. So I'd say hurricane, that's usually humid. No, this is dry air, very, I'm talking from a wind velocity like a hurricane, so strong I've seen heavy equipment get moved around that we've had to anchor.
Unbelievable.
But it cools it so quickly. It's very, very interesting.
But it doesn't melt the chocolate. That is just wild.
And we don't allow pictures of this apparatus, but what happens is this is something we developed. Nobody else has it. But
It's the size of a... It's like a room. It's like its own little individual room.
Well, when you're making 5 million pieces of candy a day, you need to figure out how you're going to move it around efficiently.
5 million pieces of candy a day.
Right.
If we were to go searching for another chocolate making facility like this, how far away do you have to go in the United States to find anything remotely like your operation here in Ponchatoula?
And there's nothing like this in the United States. There are people in the world that do something similar, but we have lines that are packing 400 boxes of chocolate a minute.
Does your sugar come from all over the world, I imagine?
No, it comes from Louisiana.
It is strict. Well, see,
Yes.
I didn't expect that. So all the sugar that you use at Elmer's Candy comes
From Louisiana. Cacao beans come from, about 70% of all cacao beans are coming from Western Africa. So I would say all the beans that we're using are coming from Ghana. And cocoa or cacao trees grow within 20 degrees of the Earth equator, so you're limited where it can grow. And Africa is the biggest producer. So and those beans will come to the United States, and there's a handful of people that actually process that, and they'll do it too. We have 2 different vendors there, and they process it to our specifications, and then we bring it in by tank truck.
So a big tanker truck full of chocolate arrives
so you
here.
see big stainless steel trucks on the highway.
Yes.
You think maybe that's oil, maybe that's gasoline, it could be chocolate. And I had a story one time. This is a long time ago. This is probably back in the 70s. But we had a truck that was delivering chocolate, and he took a wrong turn, and he went down the wrong street here in Ponchatoula. Anyway, he jackknifed his truck. He was going over a railroad crossing. I think he jackknifed the truck, and so the chocolate started coming out the top of the truck. And all the kids in the neighborhood ran over and were like showering in the chocolate. They thought it was the most amazing thing ever.
Oh, that's crazy.
No, we didn't use that chocolate afterwards.
Well, I didn't get a chocolate bath while visiting Elmer's in Ponchatoula. I did see the Easter Bunny, who sent me off with a bounty of Easter candy. Catch this. This was before Valentine's Day. As Rob explained, annually their Easter candy doesn't hit the stores until after February 14th. So needless to say, I'd never had a chance to eat Heavenly Hash that early in the year before. Here's my big takeaway. Do not wait for the Easter Bunny to arrive. Eat your Easter candy as soon as you can get your hands on it. That same grandpa who always had a box of Elmer's chocolates on hand was also one of those New Orleanians with Heavenly Hash and gold bricks stashed in the freezer. So, growing up, goodness knows what the vintage of his Heavenly Hash was. That helped make the Easter candy that the bunny sent me home with the best I'd ever tasted. In particular, the marshmallow of the Heavenly Hash was lighter, shinier. I don't know. It was heavenly. Reluctantly, I shared some of my candy with other dyed-in-the-wool New Orleanians to test that theory. They concurred. Don't wait till Easter. Eat that candy now. I'm Poppy Tooker, and Elmer chocolate is real Louisiana Eats. Dying for some of that Elmer candy of your own? You'll find a link to the historic Elmer Candy Corporation in today's notes, where you can also purchase candy to be shipped anywhere in the U.S. Don't miss a delicious serving of Louisiana Eats by subscribing to our podcast. Also, visit poppytooker.com for lots more recipes and delicious food ideas. Louisiana Eats original theme music by Johnny Sketch and the Dirty Notes. Thanks to Sarah Holtz and Reggie Morris, who produced this podcast. I'm Poppy Tooker. Thanks for listening, and thanks to our major sponsors, Camellia Bean, Zatarans, French Market Coffee, and Rouse's Markets. Visit poppytooker.com to see a full list of our partners. This Louisiana Eats Quick Bite was produced by Poppy Tooker Broadcasting.